We're back. Jori, I have a few storylines that have just been percolating in the back of my brain. Let's get into them here. First of all, again, this is like stuff that we heard or saw in minicamp that we're wondering if it becomes a true tea leaf in training camp. First of all, this quote from Jalen Hurts I found so fascinating, where he essentially said like 95% of the offense being installed is new. This was the full quote from Jalen Hurts. You get to a point where you feel, I'm going to be comfortable with this. I like this. That time comes when you rep it. But right now, it's been a lot of new inventory in, the majority of it, probably 95% of it being new. And so it's just been that process, and it's been a fun process because you get to see what works for other people. Jori, I thought this was interesting because like 95% of the offense being new is a rather extreme thing. Now, Nick Sirianni kind of tried to walk that back a little bit. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about Brian Johnson, like how much of that was really Brian Johnson's offense? It's been a hyper-specific offense that the Eagles have run with Jalen Hurts under center. So I don't know. The 95% quote caught my eye.
Okay, you're going to get cynical, Jori, on this one. Get ready for it.
Incredible. Good.
You have so many guys come from college to the NFL, much less another NFL team to another NFL team, and certainly much less the same NFL team with the same cast basically around it, but a different coordinator, and be like, football is football. It's just terminology. Do I think that Jalen Hurts has 95% new terminology? That's possible. Do I think that Jalen Hurts has 95% new game? What sport is he playing, if so? Because it's not professional American football, let me tell you. I think that Kellen Moore probably has different philosophies. And if anything, it might just feel so new because Jalen Hurts is someone who basically didn't have any stability for so many years. It was something like 7 play callers in 8 years, and he just kept going from play caller to play caller to play caller, which he's kind of doing now. And so honestly, if anything, like he's seen so much over the course that I'm surprised he views this as such a change, given how much change he's already gone through from high school to college to the NFL levels. I am fascinated to see what Kellen Moore does with him, though, because Kellen Moore is going from Dak Prescott to Justin Herbert to Jalen Hurts, who Justin and Jalen are such different players that he's going to have back-to-back in consecutive years. I also think Dak handles the game very differently in terms of, again, we were talking about what he does at the line of scrimmage. Not that the other guys aren't capable of it. That's just not necessarily what they do. Jalen's a lot more of a run threat, and particularly with that tush-push than what Justin does. I also, what I think might be the answer here, I think we cannot underestimate the loss of Jason Kelce this year, because I was talking to Josh Myers, the Green Bay center, about this. And when I was starting out in this league, 2016, Dak Prescott's rookie year, Travis Frederick, perennial All-Pro, was his center. And Travis just helped that transition so much because the center can really take a ton off the quarterback's plate. Okay, well then Travis retires, and it's like, yeah, Tyler Biadasz wasn't a bad player, but he was never going to be able to do what Travis had done after all of those years. Jalen Hurts might be having to take on a lot more of the calls of the line of scrimmage, a lot more of the managing and protections, a lot more of the play calls because Jason Kelce isn't there. I don't know that. I haven't visited Philly, but I think that could be a really interesting answer why.
Well, on that note, I saw this tweet from Sheil Kapadia of The Ringer, who, has also covers the Eagles. He said, went to Eagles practice today, thought Jalen Hurts was impressive, and noted there's much more on his plate. Protections without Kelce, shifts, motion. He said he just threw the ball pretty accurately today. But I think that first point there about much more on his plate is exactly what we're talking about. And this is what caught my eye about the 95% quote, because when I watch Kellen Moore's offense and when I watch what the Eagles have been doing, yeah, one of those puts a lot more on the quarterback's plate than the other. And I think the fact that Jalen Hurts is now having to do that without Jason Kelce, I do think it's like, and I've been thinking about this all offseason, that it's a bit of like an inflection point season for Jalen Hurts. Not that like, oh, he's not going to be the quarterback or this is a referendum on how good he is or whatever, but I just think he's going to have to do a lot more, like be kind of he's going to bear the biggest burden on the team, I think, more so than he has previously. And like how he responds to that, I think is going to be a super fascinating storyline to track. And, there's always this temptation, Jori, in the fantasy space with Kellen Moore's offense, and like the natural contrarian in me always kind of wants to push back on this, because again, if you look at Kellen Moore's offense from a on paper perspective, they run a lot of plays, they pass the ball a lot, and Kellen, especially last year, even in a year with the Chargers, did a lot of really good things that we like, the motion at the snap, all of that stuff. But so there's a temptation in the fantasy space to be like, oh, this is an offense we want to invest in, and like, let's nuke up projections because of all of this, for all these players. I think that could very well be true because there's a lot of really damn good players in Philadelphia. But I also just wonder, because I think that the big transition here is also not being thought about. And could this be an offense that maybe by the end of the season, if Hurts is up to the task, which why can't he be? I don't know. Maybe he really is burning things down. He's lighting the league on fire, and AJ Brown's like pacing for a 1,900-yard season. That is possible, but it could also be a team that kind of takes a little bit to get ramped up here because of how big the transition is.
Yeah, it's a fascinating professional moment for Kellen Moore, too, because Kellen became the offensive coordinator when Dak had already had some of that responsibility on his plate. He went to the Chargers after Justin Herbert. From what I understand, I know less about that than Dak, had also already been responsible for a lot of these things. I wonder if it's in the best interest for Jalen to be responsible for this, not because I think he's not capable of it. Smart guy, athletic, knows football well. I'm not questioning that. But when you think about what he does with the mobility and his dual threat capabilities, do you lose some of that if he's having to think at a higher level? Like, I'm thinking about the defensive equivalent of, hey, let's just have guys attack and not play a two-gap defensive front, et cetera, because we don't want them to have to think. Well, if you make Jalen do the equivalent of that two-gapping, do you not get him to attack as quickly and as effectively as he was before?
It's a great question. And I think that it comes back to that Rodgers quote that you were saying earlier, where guys aren't playing quarterback as much. They're passers, but they're not quarterbacks, right? I think that's what Jalen Hurts has been so far. And can he be more? I think he's a tough guy to bet against based on just his history. But I do think that we are maybe not like just the fantasy dorks, maybe those of us on this side of it, maybe are not taking into account how big of a transition is going to take place here. And look, again, there's volatility there. Frank Schwab came on the show and said it best that this could be a team that wins the Super Bowl, or it could be a team that like fires their coach by Halloween. I do think that's possible with this Eagles team, and the offense sort of kind of perfectly encapsulates that.